Guys, welcome back to Crimson Rift Africa, where we explore the most disturbing, often overlooked stories from across the continent. If you're new here, this is the place where history, horror, and humanity collide, unfiltered, raw, and deeply African. Today's journey isn't just a retelling of true crime, it's a confrontation with the parts of our society that we often try to ignore. The shadows that stretch behind closed doors, the silent screams buried beneath floorboards, and the trauma that lingers long after headlines fade. Across Africa, women have historically been seen as caretakers, nurturers, preservers of life and dignity. But as we've seen before, evil does not wear one face. It doesn't always come cloaked in power or authority. Sometimes it comes in the form we least expect. This episode is a descent into the darkest chapters of female criminality on the African continent, from the echoing alleys of colonial Alexandria to the industrial streets of Johannesburg, through the rural silence of Zimbabwe, and into the densely populated chaos of Maiduguri, Nigeria. We follow the bloody footprints left behind by women who killed and kept killing. Before we begin, a strong disclaimer. The following documentary is based entirely on publicly available reports, police records, archival accounts, and investigative journalism. Every effort has been made to ensure factual accuracy, but due to the historical nature and sensitivity of some of these cases, especially those involving confessions, cultural contexts, and state involvement, some discrepancies may exist across sources. This content involves themes of murder, ritual violence, abuse, and child victims. Viewer discretion is strongly advised. We approach these cases with the utmost respect, knowing that real lives were lost. We believe stories must be told responsibly and with heart. Now breathe deep. We begin. Egypt, a land of timeless deserts, ancient secrets, and living contradictions. From the monumental glory of the pyramids to the bustling alleys of Cairo, this North African nation is where pharaohs once ruled. Revolutions stirred the masses, and history bleeds into the present. With a population surpassing 110 million people, Egypt is one of the most influential countries on the African continent, politically, culturally, and historically. It is the Arab world's beating heart, a crossroads of civilizations, faiths, and empires. Islam is the dominant religion, Arabic the main language, and the Nile River, the longest on earth, continues to sustain life across an otherwise arid landscape. Egypt's story is not just one of glory, it is also one of struggle. Social divisions run deep, poverty remains widespread, and the justice system, for much of the 20th century, has wrestled with colonial legacy and internal corruption. In the early 1900s, as British forces held the reins of power and nationalist sentiments surged from Alexandria to Aswan, one case gripped the nation like no other. In the early 20th century, Egypt was a country of contrasts. Streets bustled with the echo of horse-drawn carriages, colonial officers in khaki uniforms patrolled with an air of entitlement, and markets overflowed with the scent of spices and the murmur of dialects from every corner of the region. This was the first time the Egyptian public would see women, poor, marginalized women, charged with crimes so brutal, so deliberate, that even seasoned officers of the law were shaken. It's early December 1920. A small, two-story house in the Laban district of Alexandria has begun to attract whispers from the neighbors. Something about the place feels off. Some say the smell of rot wafts from its cellar. During a routine renovations ordered by the homeowner's relative, a laborer begins to dig beneath the tiled floor of the back room. What he uncovers is not clay, not old brick, but bone. Moments later, a corpse wrapped in cloth emerges from the soil, then another, and another. The police are called. Within 24 hours, the home on 26 El Nabi Daniel Street is declared a crime scene. Investigators from Alexandria's Criminal Division, led by Chief Inspector Ibrahim Hamdi, arrive and begin excavation. The more they dig, the more horror is revealed. In total, 3 women's bodies are found under that floor, all buried face down, hands tied behind their backs, some still adorned with remnants of jewelry and torn galabeas. None have identification, but based on missing person reports filed in the previous year, suspicions begin to mount. 2 weeks later, a second house, this one in Kam El Dika, just a short carriage ride away, leads to a similar discovery. Same type of grave, same method of binding, same profile of victim, women between the ages of 18 and 45. All had disappeared without a trace in the last year. Many were said to have been last seen headed toward the market. Most were assumed to have run away, or worse, sold into trafficking. But now a new terrifying possibility was taking shape. Someone, or perhaps a group, was preying on women, killing them, and burying them under their own floorboards. As days pass, officers begin connecting the locations, tracking missing persons reports, and mapping the homes where bodies were found. They notice a disturbing consistency. All homes were rented under aliases or by women claiming to be from out of town. None of the landlords were ever paid long-term. In every case, nearby residents reported the same sequence: a flurry of visitors at the beginning, then eerie silence. Police begin tracing the rental contracts, questioning landlords, neighbors, and shopkeepers. Eventually, one name keeps coming up: a woman, notorious in the streets of Alexandria for her foul temper, but also known to bring food to the poor and shelter to sex workers escaping abuse. Her name was Sakina Ali Hammam. By early January 1921, Sakina and her older sister Raya Ali Hammam are arrested. The police, having followed the rental trail, search the home where the women are staying. There they find pieces of jewelry, scraps of women's clothing, and most damning, a cellar with signs of recent digging. It doesn't take long for Sakina to crack. Faced with evidence and relentless interrogation, she confesses. What she reveals shocks the entire country. For over a year, she and Raya, along with their 2 male accomplices, Muhammad Abdalal and Hasabala, lured vulnerable women into their homes under the pretense of hospitality or opportunity. Many victims were sex workers, widows, or poor women with no family support. Once inside, they were offered drinks, then strangled, often while music played to cover the sound. The motive was simple: robbery. Jewelry was stolen and sold on the black market. Bodies were buried in secret grave pits beneath their homes. The total number of victims officially attributed to the group? At least 13 women, though some sources suggest more. The trial begins in May 1921, held at the Alexandria Criminal Court. Crowds pack the courtroom. Egyptian newspapers cover every detail. The public is stunned, not just by the horror of the crimes, but by the fact that 2 women in a deeply conservative society had orchestrated such methodical and violent killings. Raya and Sakina show little remorse in court. Sakina at one point laughs. Raya remains largely silent. Their accomplices deny responsibility but are convicted alongside them. On December 21st, 1921, all 4 are sentenced to death. In early 1922, they are executed, making Raya and Sakina the first women executed by the modern Egyptian state. The story of Raya and Sakina becomes legend, a fixture in Egyptian pop culture. Their crimes are retold in plays, films, and books. To some, they are symbols of poverty-driven desperation. To others, pure evil. In the southernmost tip of the African continent lies a country as vast in landscape as it is layered in history. South Africa, home to sweeping coastlines, rugged mountains, and a diverse population, has long been a land of contradictions. By the early 20th century, it was still under the weight of British colonial influence. It was within this setting that the country would meet its first known female serial killer. And she wasn't a mysterious stranger in the night or a shadowy figure in the slums. She was a nurse, a mother, a widow, twice over. Her name was Daisy Louisa de Melker, and the horrors she orchestrated from inside her own home would shock an entire nation. Yet this case would not begin with a body found in a dark alley, nor with a scream in the night. It would begin with a visit to a pharmacist. It was 1932 in Johannesburg, a city built on gold and kept alive by ambition. In a modest home in Turfontein, Daisy de Melker walked into a local pharmacy. Her request was precise and unusual. She wanted to purchase strychnine, a highly toxic substance typically used as rat poison. When asked why she needed it, she said rats had infested her basement. The pharmacist hesitated. Strychnine wasn't something dispensed lightly, even in those days. But Daisy was well known in the area. A widow refined in appearance, a qualified nurse. Why would she lie? The pharmacist recorded the transaction, and not long after, the son of Daisy's first husband would be dead. Rhodes Cowell, her 20-year-old stepson, had fallen ill suddenly and violently. In the days leading up to his death, he suffered from severe convulsions, muscle spasms, and a grotesque, rictus-like grin, classic signs of strychnine poisoning. Doctors initially believed it was natural causes, perhaps tetanus or a sudden seizure. But Daisy's behavior at the funeral raised concerns. She appeared calm, detached even, and shortly after his burial, she attempted to cash in on an insurance policy worth $100 that she had taken out on Rhodes just a few months prior. This wasn't the first time Daisy had benefited from a loved one's death. To understand the magnitude of what was unfolding, investigators began to look into Daisy's past. What they found was alarming. She had been married 3 times. Her first husband, William Cowell, had died in 1923. At the time, doctors attributed his death to cerebral malaria. Her second husband, Robert Sproat, died in 1927, reportedly of influenza. Now her stepson, Rhodes, was dead as well. In each case, Daisy had received small but timely life insurance payouts. Her first husband's death earned her $1,795, a significant sum at the time. Her second husband's death brought in $1,200. Investigators found that she had taken out life policies on all 3, quietly, methodically, and with chilling consistency. But there was something else. All 3 men had died after displaying symptoms consistent with poisoning, not natural illness. And in each case, Daisy had been the sole caregiver during their final days. Based on mounting suspicion, authorities exhumed the bodies of all 3 men. Forensic analysis in the early 1930s was still in its infancy, but South African pathologists, working with British toxicologists, were able to detect traces of arsenic and strychnine in the bodies of both William Cowell and Rhodes Cowell. Daisy was arrested in October 1932 and charged with the murders of her 2 husbands and stepson. The public was stunned. A seemingly respectable woman, a nurse who had taken a vow to heal, now stood accused of being a cold-blooded killer. The case would be the first in South Africa's legal history where a woman faced the death penalty for serial murder. The trial began in Johannesburg in October 1932, and it quickly became a national obsession. Courtrooms were packed with journalists and citizens eager to catch a glimpse of the woman now dubbed the Black Widow of South Africa. The prosecution painted Daisy as manipulative, calculating, and deeply greedy. She had married for convenience, insured her husbands and stepson, and then slowly poisoned them with substances she had easy access to through her work as a nurse. She used her profession to shield her crimes, exploiting the trust of her family and the medical ignorance of the time. The defense, on the other hand, argued that the deaths were coincidental. They portrayed Daisy as a victim of tragic circumstance, pointing to a history of illness in the family and the stress of widowhood. But the evidence was overwhelming, particularly the toxicology results and insurance documents. The trial lasted a month. On December 5, 1932, Daisy was found guilty of murdering Rhodes Cowell, her stepson, and Robert Sproat, her second husband. She was acquitted of murdering her first husband, William Cowell, due to insufficient direct evidence, although the court acknowledged that his death was suspicious. Daisy Louisa de Melker was sentenced to death by hanging. On December 30, 1932, at the Pretoria Central Prison, she was executed. She was 46 years old, and the first white woman to be executed under South African law. Her story remains one of the most sensational criminal cases in South African history. It was the first time that the South African public truly grappled with the idea that a woman, and not just any woman, but a nurse and mother, could orchestrate such cold, methodical killings. Books were written, plays were staged. Even decades later, her name is mentioned in psychology textbooks and criminology seminars. To this day, Daisy de Melker's crimes raise uncomfortable questions. How many more deaths were never investigated? How did a woman manage to kill quietly, undetected, for nearly a decade? And what drives someone to poison those closest to them, not out of passion or rage, but out of profit? As Daisy de Melker's tale comes to a grim close, her carefully calculated poisonings, her manipulations, and her final walk to the gallows, South Africa closes one chapter of horror and opens another. A century may have passed, but the impulse to kill for personal gain did not disappear with her execution. In fact, it evolved, took on a uniform, a badge, and walked straight into the very system meant to protect the innocent. Now we find ourselves in modern-day South Africa. The cities are bigger. The laws are more defined. Technology tracks almost everything. But even with all that progress, evil finds a way to slip through. Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu was not a woman you'd expect to see in shackles. She was a decorated police sergeant, stationed at the Tembisa South Police Station in Gauteng, a woman in uniform, sworn to serve and protect. For years, she commanded the respect of her peers in the community she worked in. But behind that smile and authority was something most of her colleagues would later admit they missed. Something cold, calculating, and terrifying. Between 2012 and 2018, 6 members of Nomia's own family, people who trusted her completely, ended up dead. All under suspicious circumstances, all carrying one detail in common. They were insured. Policies had been taken out in their names, dozens of them. And every time the beneficiary listed, Nomia herself. It started with her cousin, witness Madala Homu. In March 2012, his body was found dumped in Olifantsfontein, brutally bludgeoned, left alone in a field like refuse. Police ruled it a violent robbery. No suspects were ever arrested. But just weeks later, Nomia walked into an insurance office with his death certificate and walked out with R131,000 in payouts. No one questioned a thing. Then came her sister, Audrey Somisa Ndlovu. In June 2013, Audrey was found strangled to death in a rented room, a scarf tied so tightly around her neck that it embedded into the skin. Nomia cried at the funeral. She comforted family members. She said all the right things. But she also quietly claimed 717,000 rands from multiple life and funeral policies she had taken out on Audrey's name. Months passed, and then Audrey's son, Brilliant Mashigo, also turned up dead. Head trauma, roadside body. The list of casualties was growing. The suspicion, nowhere in sight. And then there was her lover, Maurice Mabasa, a fellow officer, her live-in partner. In October 2015, his body was found near Olifantsfontein, stabbed more than 80 times. 80. His face barely recognizable. That time, police did raise eyebrows. But they didn't look at Nomia. Not yet. Meanwhile, she collected 416,000 rands in insurance benefits. By the time 2018 rolled around, 6 people linked to Nomia had died. Some she watched die. Others she plotted against. And she wasn't finished. Her next target was her own mother, and then 5 more members of her extended family in Bush Buckridge. All of them had policies out in their names. All of them stood between her and another payday. But this time, something went wrong. The man she hired to do the killings, someone she thought she could intimidate, backed out. He went to the police instead. And what followed was a trap so well set, so meticulously executed, it finally exposed the truth. Undercover officers wired a car. Nomia, thinking she was speaking to a hitman, laid out the plan in cold detail. She spoke of how to drug the family, where to burn them, how to ensure they were silenced with socks in their mouths so neighbors wouldn't hear the screams. She talked about the policies, the payouts. She even explained how she'd cry at the funeral just enough to look real. When she was arrested in 2018, the real investigation began, and what it uncovered was unlike anything in South African history. Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu had taken out at least 28 insurance policies on family members and romantic partners. She'd faked signatures, impersonated victims over the phone, and even bought multiple funeral plans under different providers to maximize her profits. Her house of lies had been built brick by brick over 6 years, and every brick was bloodstained. At trial, prosecutors laid out every claim, every lie, every photograph of the victims. Nomia sat there calm, occasionally weeping. But when the recordings were played, the ones of her ordering her mother's murder, there was no denying what she was. The jury didn't need long. She was found guilty on 6 counts of murder, 4 counts of fraud, and multiple counts of attempted murder and incitement to commit murder. The judge gave her 6 life sentences plus 90 additional years. The scale of her crimes sparked outrage across the country. Insurance firms were forced to re-evaluate policy application systems. The SAPS was humiliated. One of their own had become one of South Africa's most prolific serial killers, and for years no one noticed. What makes this case even more haunting is not just that she killed family, but that she used systems of trust and protection to do it. She weaponized love, duty, and paperwork, and she wore the badge while doing it. When Nomia Ndlovu was escorted out of the courtroom after her sentencing, she looked unmoved. No tears, no rage, just a blank stare. Like Daisy de Melker nearly a century before her, she stood at the center of her own undoing. But unlike Daisy, who used arsenic and silence, Nomia used loyalty, smiles, and insurance forms, and left behind a trail of graves. After the chilling story of Nomia Rosemary Ndlovu and her betrayal of law enforcement and family, we now turn to Zimbabwe, a nation known for its resilience and rich culture. Yet within its villages lie stories of tragedy that defy expectation, of mothers turning on their own offspring with lethal intent. In 2014, in rural Masvingo province, a case emerged that shattered the notion of instinctual protection. A young woman named Angeline Mabisa, 32 years old, mother of several small children, poisoned 3 children, her nephew Leon, 7, and her toddlers Farai, 2, and Taurai, 6, using a pesticide known locally as Pest Off. All 3 died within hours of each other in June 2014. When authorities arrived, they found Angeline collapsed nearby, the same poison consumed by her children in her own mouth. She was rushed to hospital and would later admit to the killings, claiming she had struggled with mental health issues and had felt overwhelmed. The local media exploded. Newspapers and radio stations ran the headline, "Poison Mum Goes on Killing Spree." Community leaders, clergy, and ordinary villagers were stunned, not only by the horror of child victims in what is often described as child dumping, but by the betrayal of maternal trust. Her trial was swift. Zimbabwean courts heard how she had poisoned the children using the same pesticide she admitted obtaining. Mental health experts testified about her possible psychological distress, though no formal mental health diagnosis was made in court. She pleaded guilty and was sentenced to life imprisonment, the mandatory penalty for murder in Zimbabwe. Her case sparked national conversations about maternal mental health, rural isolation, and the failure of social services to detect patterns before tragedy struck. While filicide is tragically rare, Angeline's case remains one of the most public and legally documented examples in Zimbabwe's legal history. The term dumping a baby, known locally for neonaticide, took on new meaning in the face of her actions. As other African cases often center on greed or ritual, hers is starkly different. It is rooted in tragedy, psychological despair, and community heartbreak. It reminds us that darker impulses can emerge not just from ambition or avarice, but from mental collapse and isolation. As Angeline's case revealed the deep fractures of maternal despair and community breakdown, we now follow the story of another Zimbabwean mother whose betrayal of kin was far more brutal and faster. Chivu is a quiet town in Mashonaland East, where neighbors greet each other by name, and the rhythm of life is measured in rituals and routines. It's not a place of headlines or flash, but in November 2020, it became the site of one of the country's most horrific crimes. Emelda Marizanhi was 30 years old. She had 4 daughters, ages 9, 5, 3, and 1. She was married to Lamek Branda, and to most observers, she led an ordinary life. But beneath the surface, tension was simmering. Neighbors said marital conflict had escalated. Emelda claimed her husband was abusive, unfaithful, and preferred his mistresses, even blaming him for showing more affection to their children than to her. She also alleged infidelity and betrayal. It wasn't long before grief-curdling violence erupted. One evening, Emelda laced her daughter's drinks with rat poison. She told them to sleep. When they survived, she retrieved a knife and slit each of their throats as they lay in the dark. The youngest was just 1 year old. After the killings, she walked directly to the local police station and confessed, collapsing at the counter. Zimbabwe's media splashed the horror across front pages. The High Court sentenced her to 4 life terms in March 2023, one for each daughter, with Justice Munamato Mutavetsi declaring her crimes aggravated, cold-blooded, and a fundamental betrayal of motherhood. He rejected her plea of insanity, citing forensic evaluations that found no mental disorder, and emphasized the calculated nature of the murders, with poison followed by slashing, no cooling-off period, no remorse. Emelda insisted she acted out of love and desperation, believing her daughters would suffer under another woman. Prosecutors showed recordings, forensic evidence, funeral policy updates, and chilling consistency in her planning. They painted the picture of a mother who became executioner. Justice Mutavetsi ruled, "She is a dangerous individual, one who butchers her own children in cold blood. She does not deserve a second chance, nor a return to society." He further reprimanded the husband for provoking the dangerous rage that destroyed the innocent lives of his daughters. In court, Emelda showed no visible emotion. No weeping, no plea for mercy. She stood unmoved, her silence echoing far louder than any words. Her case forced Zimbabwe to confront painful questions about gender, mental health, conflict, and violence. How does a mother transform into a murderer in a single night? What support systems failed her or failed her children? And so Zimbabwe now remembers Emelda not as a mother, but as a warning that sometimes violence comes not from strangers or strangers' shadows, but from the people we love most. We now leave the troubled silence of Zimbabwe's criminal underworld and turn our gaze westward, toward one of Africa's most populous and powerful nations. Nigeria. With over 220 million people, Nigeria is the beating heart of West Africa. Nigeria is a nation of bold colors, proud heritage, and fierce contrasts. It's a land where tribal traditions collide with tech startups, and where cultural brilliance often lives side by side with profound tragedy. But within its vast borders, Nigeria also hides stories few are willing to tell. Stories that push the limits of belief, and perhaps none is more chilling than that of a girl named Jummai Hassan. In 2001, in the northeastern Nigerian city of Maiduguri, Borno State, a disturbing case shocked both local authorities and the nation. A 2-year-old boy named Ibrahim Chinda had gone missing from his neighborhood. His parents, like many others in the region already plagued by poverty and insurgency, searched frantically. When his small body was discovered buried in a shallow grave, police launched a full investigation. What they uncovered was darker than anyone anticipated. The breakthrough came not from forensic evidence, but from a 13-year-old girl named Jummai Hassan. She confessed to the murder. According to police reports, Jummai lured the toddler away, applied a mysterious powder to his body, a substance she claimed was capable of paralyzing and killing, and then watched as he died. She admitted to assisting in the burial and guided police to the exact spot where the body was recovered. But that was only the beginning. During interrogation, Jummai described her involvement in what she said was a secret cult, a group she claimed had initiated her when she was just 6 years old. She told investigators that the cult trained her to kill, that they used the powder on victims, removed organs, particularly the heart, and carried out rituals for power, protection, and spiritual energy. The most chilling part of her confession, she claimed responsibility for the deaths of as many as 48 individuals, including her own father. Authorities took the claim seriously. For days, police combed the outskirts of Maiduguri, searching for mass graves, but none were found. Despite her detailed accounts, there was no physical evidence to support the broader claims of multiple murders. Only the killing of Ibrahim Chinda could be verified and tied directly to her actions. Community members were stunned. Many had known Jummai as a quiet student at a local junior secondary school. She had no previous record of violence or mental instability, but her demeanor during questioning was calm, and her confessions were disturbingly precise. Investigators concluded that while the full extent of her claims could not be proven, her involvement in Ibrahim's death was undeniable. She was arrested and charged with kidnapping and culpable homicide. Due to her age, only 13 at the time, Nigerian law prohibited a death sentence. Instead, she was tried under juvenile procedures. The case moved through the courts for several years. In 2012, the Court of Appeal upheld her conviction in a 15-year prison sentence. She had already served a portion of that time in a juvenile facility. The case raised serious questions in Nigeria about child indoctrination, cult influence, and how criminal syndicates could exploit vulnerable young people in areas where law enforcement was weak and traditional beliefs still held sway. Although no further bodies were discovered and no other suspects were arrested in connection with her claims, Jummai Hassan remains one of the youngest individuals in Nigerian history to be convicted of such a brutal crime. Her name has long since disappeared from the headlines, but the case still lingers in public memory as a reminder that in regions fractured by violence, even the youngest members of society are not always just victims. Sometimes they are part of the horror themselves. These were not spontaneous acts of violence. They were planned, practiced, and executed with precision. Psychologists who reviewed the case described Jummai as a victim of deep indoctrination. She had been taken at an age when belief and obedience were interchangeable. Over time, the line between right and wrong had faded. She told officers she never thought what she was doing was wrong. The cult, she said, told her it was for power, that the hearts of the dead held energy, that spirits needed blood to protect the group. Was she a cold-blooded killer? or a child used as a weapon. And what made the story even more devastating was how many similar cases began to surface across the region once hers became public. Other communities came forward with stories of missing children, suspected cult attacks, and whispers of poison, ritual, and manipulation. As we close this chapter, I want to take a moment to honor the victims, those whose lives were stolen too soon, and the families left behind carrying the weight of loss and unanswered questions. Their stories deserve to be remembered with respect and empathy, never forgotten or overshadowed by the darkness. If you have any cases you think deserve to be told, or stories that need to be heard, please drop your suggestions in the comments. Your voice helps us shine a light on these hidden truths across Africa. Thank you so much for watching, for listening, and for standing with us as we explore these difficult stories. If this video moved you, please like this video to support the channel, subscribe. For more deep dives into true crime and untold stories, click the notification bell so you don't miss the next video. And most importantly, comment below. What case should we cover next? Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, take care. I'll see you in the next video. Peace.